So, Gemma, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Maybe before we get into our conversation, you could introduce yourself and let everybody know a little bit about you.
Yeah. So my name is Gemma Antcliffe and I am a therapist in private practice. I am based in Ripon in North Yorkshire and I have been a qualified counsellor for 13 years now. In private practice, well, technically I did start back in 2019, but it was a very short six-month stint
Mhm.
before COVID hit and then I went on maternity. So really I like to think that I've properly been doing it since January 2022.
Super. And I can't remember when did we first get in contact with each other?
I think it was around about this time last year
Okay.
with your virtual summit.
Okay, super. So tell me a little bit about the journey that you've made into private practice. So where were you working before you decided to go into private practice?
So I worked in mental health services. So I worked in for Mind, the mental health charity. I graduated from psychology, went traveling, fell into event management, which I loved because it suited my organizational skills, but I wasn't really passionate and then decided to study to become a counselor and thought I would get a job alongside it that would complement my studies. So that's when I started working for Mind.
Brilliant, brilliant. And what made the decision for you then to go into private practice?
So I am married to my husband who is in the army, which meant that when we got married back in 2013, I was working for Mind. But with his job, we have to move every 2 years, if not more than that. So as you can imagine, your CV starts to look like you're not the type of employee that anybody wants to take on. And yeah, every time we would move, we would, you're not just moving down the road, you're moving often 200 miles away. You'd have to get a job from scratch. So it was becoming increasingly difficult to keep my career going within the mental health sector. But we also encountered problems with conceiving. So really, I think a mixture of being married to somebody in the army where his job would always come first and experiencing infertility led me to not work for a while, kind of focus on other things. And then when I wanted to get back into work, it was then trying to manage it around family commitments. And it felt like a flexible thing to do and using my skills.
That sounds like a lot to try and juggle.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reflecting on my little timeline. When I first started in private practice, my husband was working away. I had a 1 year old and a nearly 4 year old, and that's when I started. And I can't believe I did it now. I would put the children to bed at 7 o'clock, and then my first client was walking through the door at 7:30. And I would hope that they would stay asleep. And for a long time, I thought I wouldn't do it because of that. But then I thought, do you know what? If they wake up, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It only happened twice in the whole 3 years I did it that way. So
I was going to say, how did you manage if that happened?
I did. I've got a very good friend that lives very locally. She's like their surrogate grandma. One time I did have to send her an SOS message just saying one of them will not go back to sleep. And she was literally around here within minutes and sorted it out for me. But luckily, on the two occasions, it was with clients that I'd worked with for a while. They knew it wasn't something that happened regularly.
Isn't it amazing when you look back and you think about the things that you used to do? Because I was very similar. When my children were young, I used to actually see people in the house and it would be late appointments in the evening. And I would send my husband out with the two toddlers at like 8 o'clock at night. I think, what on earth was I doing? But I suppose it's needs must, isn't it? Especially when getting started up. And maybe something that we've learned as we've got more experience is that we're thinking about the wanting to get people in through the door and wanting to see clients, but maybe we think about it a little bit differently now that we're a little bit more established in our
I think
practices.
so. I think so. But you know what? I think that when you do counselling training, I think quite rightly you've got to learn about boundaries from very early on and how to be ethical and professional. But I think you do really worry about showing any signs of being a human. And I did think sometimes the best things that happen in the counselling room is when you are just a human or you make a mistake or yeah, I kind of thought it's not the worst thing that could happen.
Absolutely. You mentioned there about going through your own fertility struggles. That probably leads us nicely into talking about the fact that this is where you've kind of niched in your own private practice.
Yes, I think you'll probably remember me saying I didn't want to niche. I felt really scared of doing it. First of all, I didn't know. Back in 2019, when I did my little 6 month stint, that was when I set up my website and I went to a local marketing company within Ripon. And I remember the guy that runs it, Mark, who has been so generous with his time over the years, he told me, become an expert in something, find a way of doing something once and delivering it to lots of people and monetizing that and grow your community on social media, and all of those things felt like the most alien thing to
Mm.
me 6 years ago. And I was a bit like, I'm a counselor, we're never an expert in anything. I was like deep in the counselor speak, and even though I've niched, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I get what he was saying. You've got to become this voice of authority that people like and trust, and you're the person that they might go to if they have an issue. I totally get what he was saying now, those 6 years ago. But yeah, I remember him saying, become an expert. And I was thinking, but I'm not an expert in anything, which of course I know isn't true. But I think that I got in my own head, I got in the way. So for a long time, I didn't know what I wanted to niche into. I didn't. I just saw, clients, adults for all varying presenting issues. And actually that worked quite well because my youngest was still very young. But when she started school last September, and I was thinking about, okay, I do need to grow my business. And I think that's when I joined your summit, Claire, because I think at that point I was thinking, I don't want to leave it to September for her to start and then me suddenly be like, right, I've got more time, what shall I do? I wanted to start percolating some ideas. I went on a course again around this time last year, and it was called Courageous Females. And it was all about trusting your gut, listening to your inner wisdom, and noticing what was going on around you. I went on that saying, I want to grow my business so that in September I can grow. And what I noticed after doing that course was three people who were acquaintances. So they didn't know me particularly well, but they knew that I'd been through infertility, and they knew that I had been successful, and they knew as a counsellor. And they contacted me all at various stages of their journey because they wanted somebody to listen to them and maybe not interrupt, wanted somebody that was going to understand, but they all wanted to know my story. And to be honest with you, it took a little bit of time for me to remember the story because infertility is a very painful experience. And I distinctly remember when I had my second child, I thought to myself, thank God I don't have to go through that again. That is an experience I want to box off and put away. And I didn't really think about it. But actually, after speaking to these women and sharing my story and seeing what happened as a result of me sharing that story with them, I think, again, because it's known to me, I didn't really think it was anything special. But then subsequently, they all came back to me and said, it was just, you don't realize how helpful it was to talk to you, to somebody that gets it. And that was resonated with me, being with somebody that gets it. But I did think quite carefully as I decided around about this time last year that I wanted to niche into it. But I was going back and forth in my own mind about, was my experience healed enough for me to do that? Because it was quite a traumatic experience and it has left an imprint. And although I'm a positive end to the story, there are still things that I find difficult even now, even though I've got my two children, because there were losses that I incurred along the way. But anyway, I decided, I did feel like I was okay when I spoke to those three people. I didn't feel the same personal pull. I felt like I could talk quite objectively about it. And in the end, I just thought, let's just give this a go. I think, I don't know whether you might have said it, Claire, in one of your sessions around niching, about how sometimes we think if we choose a particular niche, that's what we've got to stick with. And I remember you saying, like, if it doesn't work out,
It's
that's
okay.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we
Um,
did a workshop, maybe. It was a niching workshop because I seem to remember
yeah.
on it. And you were having this sort of back and forth. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
give it 3 months, 6 months of really going all in and throwing yourself into it and then review it, see how you feel, but you don't have to be tied to it forever.
Yeah, I think those are your words. You don't have to be tied to it. So I just thought I'll give it a go. But then it took me ages again to actually announce it on social media. Like, I then got in my own head about, how do you tell everybody that you have niched into this? And of course, the reality is that nobody really gives much attention to this, do we? We worry about these things of are people going to notice, what might they say? But you did a social media challenge. Was it the beginning of September?
Yeah, September, October. So the visibility challenge, you
Yes.
really threw yourself into that, which was brilliant.
Yeah. So I think at that point I was like, for God's sake, Gemma, just
Get
like,
on with it.
yeah, don't overthink this. And then you launched that visibility challenge. And I think one of the first videos you said was do a welcome post. So I just talked about this is what I'm doing now. And yeah, and I guess the rest is history. So I've really jumped into it, as you've said. I have put a lot of effort. I think that what I've realized is you've got to be really consistent with your business. Everybody says it, don't they? There's no secret other than you've got to turn up every day and be consistent and do what you say you're going to do. So actually, after doing that visibility challenge, I have mostly managed to post on my social media every day. And I know that that's not the only way that you're going to find clients, but I felt like that is my commitment to being consistent about my message, about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember. So the visibility challenge was great in that you did then go on to social media, you did announce your niche, but you also did things as part of that challenge, like you reached out to offer to write blogs to other professionals and to connect with other professionals. And I think that's what I really love watching about you is that you are driven and that you will reach out, that you will collaborate with other people, you will step outside your comfort zone. But I think that comes with the caveat, doesn't it, of balance, trying to find the balance, the elusive balance. I think we can all struggle with between being driven, throwing yourself into your business versus it's a lot, isn't it? Like it's not easy.
Yeah. No, and that I think is probably one of the biggest challenges I've encountered. And quite honestly, a couple of weeks ago, I felt completely burnt out. I felt like I'd bitten off more than I could chew because I think if you are motivated and you want to be a success, I think it's easy to look around and see all of these things that everybody's doing. And you've said to me a number of times, I know other people have said to me a number of times, very transparent, we've not got to where we are now without having to make mistakes. It's taken time. And whilst I know that rationally, there is a very irrational part of me that wants to press the fast forward button and wants to get on. And of course, we all know that we have to go through a journey. I hate that word, but we all do have to go through the journey. But I think what I have encountered on that journey is to my peril, and I've learnt that you do have to be careful.
Yeah. And I think you've learned where your strengths are as well. Because I know that we'd talked ages ago about trying different things and trying like a YouTube channel and doing other things. But I think you've realized that Instagram is where you're natural there and you're really good on video.
Yeah, I suppose with anything, you have to work out when you're a small business owner, you've got all of these tasks to do, and you have to work out what takes the least amount of effort. And I don't mean that as in the least amount of effort to not do something good, but we've talked before. I remember you asking me how
Mm.
many times does it take me to do a video or just a talking head video? And I was like, maybe 2 or 3 times. Sometimes I get it right the first time. And you were like, that is your forte. And yeah, so if I have to do anything, I would always do a talking head video because I know it won't take very much time. And generally, I think they're quite good.
Yeah, no, they are definitely. And I think as time goes by, you start to learn little ways of making things much quicker to do. In
Yeah,
terms of writing a reel, I find that even creating a reel on Instagram is way quicker than me going into Canva and creating a carousel post or doing something else. That once you get the flow of it, you can actually create a reel quite quickly. But it's still time consuming. Even the thinking about the content ideas is
yeah.
something that takes time. Would you have any advice, do you think, for people that are coming into private practice about what to maybe the highs and lows of it?
Yes. Just picking up on Instagram and Reels, what I think has really propelled me forward is getting my messaging right. And this is not something that you're taught to do in counselling courses. And what has really been the difference is me talking to somebody's pain point. And that's where niching and knowing your niche really well helps you, because what I understand now is that the higher the pain point, the more likely somebody is going to come and find you. And obviously that sounds a bit exploitative, but it isn't really. You know, they're in pain and they need to hear the right words from someone. And by knowing what that is, I think that has really helped me. I've found many clients have found me on a directory, and then they've gone onto my Instagram and they've watched my videos and they've said, you have just said exactly how I feel. And they're often the videos where I'm talking about what is really difficult about infertility. You know, that would be one top tip. You really need to know the pain points and talk to them.
Yeah. And I think that that's just highlighted as well, something that's social media is where your strength lies. That's what you're good at. That's where you're consistent, but it's not your only platform that you're on.
Yeah.
And for most people, I would always recommend that, yes, you might want to have social media if that's where you feel like good and that's where your strength lies, but it's just one part of your marketing ecosystem. You would still probably want to have your directory profiles. You would still want to have a website. There may be other platforms that you want to market yourself on. And I also describe it as, yes, the website or your directory profile, if it's well written and it's niche specific, can nearly speak, should draw your ideal client in. But actually, where social media can be an extra add-on is that they get to connect with you. They get to see you, they get to hear you, and that can just add a whole other layer onto your marketing that can be so beneficial. But it's not the only platform that you want to be on.
No, and that's it. It's this holistic way of thinking, isn't it?
That in itself, when you're saying about you want to fast track everything, if you think about all the things that you have learned, the skills that you have developed even over the last year, that if you actually took the time to sit and think back, you have learned and developed so much. But how would you possibly know that when you're going into private practice, you need to learn how to set up on social media, you need to learn how to be a content creator, you need to learn how to be a copywriter, you need to learn how to build a website. Like, there are so many things that cannot be learnt quickly or easily.
No, no, you're right. It's not a quick process, is it? And it's only by messing it up that
Yeah,
you find the person
absolutely.
that you need to find, or you realize from that mistake.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe on that, like thinking about from where you were last year to what you're doing now, because we don't often do this. We don't sit to reflect about, oh my God, I have developed so much in terms of my skills or my confidence or my messaging. Like, what is different from you a year ago to you now?
I would say I am classing this very much more as a business. I think that I had got into quite an unhelpful way of thinking, that it was a bit of a side hustle. And this was the money that we put in the pot for holidays and nice things. And actually, what's changed within me is actually, I really, really want to be a leading fertility counsellor within the UK. Like, I want people to think of me when they're talking about that sector. And I think that that has come from really investing in myself and my business. So for a long time, I was very scared to spend any money that I got from counselling. And I remember, again, this time last year, a lot has happened over the last year. I remember saying to my husband, oh, I've got £500 surplus in my counselling account. How do you think I should spend it? And he suggested that I should spend it a certain way. And we did. And then afterwards, I think we bought a washing machine. That's what we spent it on. And then afterwards, I saw a course that I wanted to do. And I thought, if I'd not spent that £500 on the washing machine, I could have just paid for that course. And I started to realize what I have within my business as an asset. And actually, that doesn't have to be contributed to the household. It can be reinvested within the business itself. So I have invested in joining your Prosper in Private Practice membership. I have gone on some business boot camps. I'm part of a growth pod group mentoring. I'm now doing your Beyond the One-to-One, because I realize that there is so much value in doing that. And I think that has pressed. I think I was already propelling myself forward, but that is what has accelerated just investing and finding expertise from other people.
Which is amazing. And although, of course, there's an investment in that, it's an investment in your future. And like you're saying, that you want to be known as a leading therapist specializing in this field. And so that requires investment.
Yeah.
And that requires work. And what's on the future plans then to help support you with that?
I would really like to write a book. I know everybody says this, but I really do want to write a book. And every time I write something, I think, really, I should be creating a little folder and just putting that all in, because it's that thing, isn't it? When you go into a niche, you think, oh, but there's loads of other people doing it. But again, what I've learned from investing in coaching, and I know you've said this, Claire, there's room for everybody and you are unique in yourself. So, I know that if I were to write a book about infertility, I would approach it from a completely different angle as, another counsellor that might be doing the same thing. So I would like to do that, but just really hone in my income streams. I think that, again, I know you say this, Claire, it's about portfolio working, always having the one-to-one clients, because that's essentially what I'm passionate about. Again, writing courses, delivering them, having resources that can sit on my website that people can buy. And I know that you're much further forward in this than me, but that's what you've done. And yeah, that's definitely the way that I want to go. I would like to create a community for women going through infertility. I don't know what that would look like. That would be something I'd love to do.
It's exciting though, isn't it, when you talk about these ideas and what they kind of the opportunities are. It's exciting to think that actually maybe 5, 10 years ago, we would have only thought about one-to-one client work. We wouldn't have really thought beyond that. So to think about these opportunities of, well, I can sell digital products on my website,
Yeah.
I can sell courses, I could even create a membership, a community membership around my ideal client. I can write a book to support to actually think about those opportunities. That right there, it is quite exciting.
Yeah, it is really exciting. But I think the main thing that many of us counsellors have to do, especially if you're niching into an area that's got some kind of personal resonance, you have to drop your guard. It took, so my counselling tutor, I have so much respect for him, but he was psychoanalytical. I did an integrative course. And because of that, I always have Ivan on my shoulder saying, should you be saying that? And that will contaminate the frame. But actually, there is a very ethical and professional way that you can disclose in a way, as long as it's coming from a space of, I'm saying this to communicate to my ideal client for them to be heard and validated. But I've had to get over myself in order to do that. And the moment I've started being very real and talking about some of my vulnerabilities, not that it's a support session for me, that's again where a big shift has happened for me.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because on a call on Friday that came up, and it was someone inside the community who is psychodynamic, I think, and very much has just been trained that you never ever disclose. And so there was a conversation around that balance between your training and your boundaries, but also the marketing perspective, because there's no getting away from the fact that from a marketing perspective, the more authentic and you that you are, the more beneficial it is. And it's that trying to find that balance for you between being a therapist, but also a business owner, and a business owner that needs to market. And I think everybody needs to decide where that personal boundary is, but also recognizing that what you're doing in your marketing and on your social media is not what you're doing in the therapy room.
Yeah.
And that you keep the two very, very separate.
Yeah, because I think I see that by disclosing that attracts. But
Yeah.
then when I'm in a counselling session with somebody, oh, I would never say, oh yeah, gosh, yeah, that happened to me too. And
about you, where the line is when you're in the session, but actually for marketing purposes, it can be incredibly beneficial. So I think everybody has to maybe be aware of that, but find the place and the level at which they're comfortable with that.
yeah, and I think leading on from that, I think again, something that stopped me was fear of judgment, about fear of what other counsellors would think about me. Which I know, I say this to my clients all the time. We spend all this time worrying about what other people think of us when really they don't they don't give us very much attention because we're all quite absorbed in our own experience. But that has been something that I'd be lying if I said I didn't still worry about that.
Absolutely. I did a
Yeah.
post last week about that I still struggle with that, still struggle with fear of judgment and comparisonitis. I don't think for people who say that they don't care, I think everybody cares to a certain degree. So I don't think you necessarily get rid of it altogether, but you still post, you still share, even through the discomfort of it.
Yeah.
It's about how you then manage it afterwards. You don't necessarily get rid of that fear completely, that fear of being visible. But for me, it's always about the greater purpose behind why I'm doing it. It's not really about me.
No, that's it.
Yeah. Um, is there anything else? I think I asked you the question about any advice for new people going into private practice, and then we've gone we've
Oh yeah.
off around the houses. Is there any final little words of wisdom or support that you would maybe offer someone who's going into private practice?
Um, I would say, other than the bits that we've already covered, I would say find some colleagues, some people that you really connect with. I've had multiple points where I've said to my husband, I'm just going to go out and get a job. I'm not going to do this anymore. And when he digs down into why I'm saying that, it's because I feel isolated and I feel quite alone. I've been like, okay, so I'm saying I want to get a job because I want colleagues. And he pointed out that not all colleagues are good. How many colleagues have you worked with, Gemma, that you've got on with? And we all know that we encounter the difficult ones. You know, we can get some great colleagues. But so he was basically saying you don't need to have a job to find your colleagues. And I was like, yes, that's so right. And again, when I did the virtual summit last year, you did a challenge. It was like doing bingo, and you had to tag something in. And another local counsellor saw that I was on it, and Claire Judd, the postnatal counsellor. And then we ended up meeting up. And then so she's immediately one of my colleagues. So I now have about 4 or 5 other therapists I talk to a lot, not always about therapy, just a bit of banter on that we've seen, or actually, I'm having a bit of a rubbish day today, or I need to tell you something really good that's happened today. Yeah, you need to find your colleagues because it is a bit of a lonely world out there. It's great that you have flexibility. There's nothing more empowering than having your own business, but yeah, find your support system.
That is super advice. And that is also just so helpful in a lot of the stuff we've talked about the fear of judgment, the fear of visibility, all of those things that we feel so uncertain about when we get caught up in our own head, that actually just having other people that get it, that we can have these conversations with, can be so, so supportive.
Yeah, because there is one counsellor in particular where I think he said that a client hadn't turned up. And I was like, sometimes I do quite like it when that happens because I get a bit of extra time. It does tend to happen when you're having a really frazzled day. And it's like, oh yeah, totally get that. And I was like, oh, I've just found my person where I can have a very honest conversation.
We can be
Yeah, it's just
human.
helpful.
Yeah, completely. This has been such a wonderful conversation, Gemma. I really appreciate you coming and chatting with me today, and I know people would have found it really helpful. Maybe before you go, you could just let my followers know where they can find you.
Yes, so as mentioned, I am on Instagram and you can find me as the IVF counsellor. And also, I have a website, Gemma Antcliffe Counselling, and you can find all my details on there.
Super. Thank you so much, Gemma.
Thank you.